What makes some stories terrifying and visceral, inspiring nightmares and making you jump at shadowy nothings when you turn the lights off at night? While other stories, well, kind of put you to sleep or make you cringe and laugh awkwardly in an attempt to salvage some kind of emotional response. Effectively creating fear in a story is difficult. Some authors owe a huge amount of their success just off the ability to pull that off consistently.
Get me out of here.
In this video, we're going to analyze and break down what makes us scared in a story, based on science and techniques as explained by famous authors like King. We'll begin with the nature of fear and discuss what fear is from a biological perspective and why things scare us. Then we'll discuss the structure of fear and learn about how stories are organized to provoke that feeling of anxiety, of tension, of dread. So before we begin, what exactly is fear? How do we feel it? Fear is a survival mechanism. We feel fear when our minds are alerted to the possibility of a threat. This triggers a fear response in the amygdala, which activates our fight or flight response, along with the release of stress hormones and the sympathetic nervous system. This is what gets your heart pumping, your pupils dilating, your muscles tensing. We're getting ready to survive. So let's talk about what makes us scared. You've probably heard of the uncanny valley before, right? And then there's also the common phobias like fear of spiders, fear of heights, fear of social situations. That one hits a little too close to home. The list goes on. I can say with 99.9% certainty that you've been scared at some point in your life. If you are those 0.1% here though, drop a comment down below and prove me wrong. Can you remember the last time you were really, truly scared? Do you remember why exactly you felt that way? If you're thinking of something like, I don't know, coming face to face with a rat, or a spider, or maybe a snake, and just freaking out, those would fall under what I call hard threats. This is when you're faced with something that could straight up mess you up. This is when your body is screaming danger signals at you, telling you that whatever the current situation is, it is not cool. But even if hard threats are terrifying in real life, they sometimes fall flat in fiction. Think about going to the zoo. You'd be terrified of a lion in the wild, but behind glass, it's something to make fun of and take selfies with. It's even less scary when you're watching a video, maybe on YouTube, of someone else taking a selfie with the lion at the zoo. With those degrees of separation, we lose that immediacy of the threat, and it just doesn't as often trigger our fear response. The same goes with words on a page or pixels on a screen. Fascinatingly, the difference biologically is actually due to the influence of our hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, which work closely with the amygdala in regulating our fear response. If the amygdala is the drama queen, then the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex are like the down-to-earth friends that put things in perspective. Once they decide that the perceived threat isn't really enough to warrant concern, they rain on the amygdala's parade and shut the drama down. So back to the zoo example. Essentially, the rational part of our brain is overriding the instinctual fear, so we feel comfortably enough to just have fun. So to summarize all that science, it just comes down to a big part of what makes things actually scary is how real the threat feels to us. It's about control. As long as we feel in control of the situation, then we can rationalize the threat and understand our relationship to the threat. We become confident that we can counteract it. This feeling of control is critical to our ability to suppress fear. Remember that, we'll be coming back to it soon. What we want to invoke is a slow burn fear, something that will seep into the audience's psyche and linger with them long after they've left our work in the dust. An itching feeling at the back of their neck that won't go away no matter how hard they scratch. How do we achieve this? Through nothing but the audience's imagination. Different creatives have put forth different models, so here we'll try and fit those pieces together. First and foremost, it is almost universally agreed upon that it is not the monstrosity itself that induces fear. It is what goes unsaid, what is implied. From Stephen King's perspective, and Lovecraft, from which King drew much inspiration, fear comes from the lack of order which these aberrations seem to imply. Indeed, it seems that fear in fiction is defined by the negative space of the text. And that's fascinating. Let's dig a little deeper into this idea. What is so scary about the unknown? The fact is, you are your own worst enemy. Search your heart, you know it to be true. When an artist creates a monster, they draw upon spiders, snakes, insects. Why? Because these are common fears, so the majority of people, the design will be discomforting. But as long as you define something, there are always people who aren't afraid, and the design will fall flat. But we also have the option to leave a fill in the blank. We can ask the audience, insert your own worst nightmare here. By not defining the enemy outright, the audience will do a better job scaring themselves than we ever could. And there's a sister idea here, very related, which is the power of ambiguity. When we aren't sure about something, we become anxious about it. We don't feel like we have control over the situation. Remember what we said earlier? This is a key component of building tension. Imagine being stuck in a room with a bomb on a 5-minute timer. Tick tock, tick tock. Snape, Snape, Severus Snape. After convincing yourself there is no escape, you will probably make your peace and accept your fate. Still terrible, but you know. Now, let's say you're stuck in a room with a bomb that goes off the next time someone rings your doorbell. Now you start thinking, when is my partner coming home? Oh crap, wait, I ordered pizza an hour ago, didn't I? When something is seemingly incomprehensible, or we simply aren't sure of the outcome, we desperately grasp at anything that can give us more information. We grasp at straws to regain some semblance of control. This is how horror movies can get you jumping at shadows as you bite your nails and scan every corner of the screen for signs of the monster. So can you see why successful horror movies try to avoid showing the monster as much as possible? Because once you show the monster, you're defining it. And it no longer has that Bogart quality. It's stuck in one form. You also lose all the beauty of the ambiguity. It's not when and where is it going to show up, or even what is it. The question just becomes, can I run faster than it? And, you know, there's usually a pretty obvious answer to that. Of course, a good monster design still has its place. If you've been teasing a monster, and probably have, you'd better have one show up at the end, or else your audience is going to feel cheated. And yes, it is still possible to freak people out by description or imagery alone. This is what Stephen King refers to as the gross out factor. But even this is built upon the idea of incomprehensibility. We create monsters that are unnatural, scenes that seemingly do not follow the normal rules of society or nature. And it's this foreign quality that lends the creep factor to our favorite evil clowns and serial killers. Okay, so we've talked a bit about the theory of scariness, but the bigger question is, how do you make a story out of these ideas? In many ways, it's analogous to plotting a story in any other genre, but you do have to approach it from a bit of a different perspective. One of the biggest pitfalls with writing horror often occurs when you start in media res, or in the middle of the action. That pitfall is failing to establish a reference point of normality up front. You must have normal before abnormal, ordinary before extraordinary. All things are relative. If everything is messed up wackadoodle from the get-go, how do you expect people to take anything at face value? If everyone is dying and having alien babies burst from their chests in the first 5 minutes, the tone loses the gravity of fear, and the whole thing just drops down a notch into the gross territory. There's no build-up. And that is the absolute key here. Ash Law lays out a great framework for how to approach the build-up and release of tension in horror. You could even say he lays down a law, if you know what I mean. According to Law, there are 4 types of fear: unease, dread, terror, and horror, escalating in that order. When approaching horror, we have to smoothly transition in and out of these types, over and over, increasing in intensity until we climax. So let's get into what these terms mean and how we should use them. First off, we have unease. Put simply, this is your foundation. How tall of a horror skyscraper you can build really depends on how solid of an unease foundation you set up first. You have normal, but now things are just a little bit off from normal. It's like after school, and you notice the same person entering and leaving the bathroom over and over, shuttling loads of paper towels to somewhere else in the building. You find a student ID on the ground, but that person was absent today. As Law says, something is wrong here, but it is not an immediate threat, and it is nebulously defined. Now, on the next level up, we have dread. Now, the possibility of danger becomes more apparent. There's something bad, and it might be nearby, but we still don't know much about how much danger we're in at the moment. We can only earn dread if we properly established unease first. You shadow this student fearing the paper towels and see him enter the basement. You wait for him to leave again before sneaking in yourself. There, you find a body wrapped in paper towels, dripped with dark red. You hold back a scream, but stumble back and send a mop and bucket crashing to the ground. Your heart stops. Did he hear you? And next comes terror. This is when danger is imminent. You hear the sounds of heavy footsteps rushing down the stairs towards you. You run or hide. You shove yourself in a cleaning locker and quietly close the door, hoping he didn't see you get in. And finally comes the horror. This is the peak of the buildup, which means that it's all downhill from here. From the moment that the danger is revealed and clarified, the tension quickly falls. When you are thrown from the cleaning cabinet to the ground and scramble away from the nearest cleaner, you get an adrenaline rush, but whether you get away or die, the tension has been reset. You can think of it like a roller coaster. Law uses the following analogy. Unease is the building excitement getting on the ride. Dread is the cars going up the hill. Terror is that delicious moment right before the drop, And then horror is that long, screaming ride down, a cathartic release of the tension that had been building. So you might be thinking,
Well, Quintus, that's cool and all, but you just gave us the steps. How do you move between them? How do I go from normal to unease or from dread to terror?
if that's what you were thinking, a great question. The answer is plot. No, not that kind of plot, like actual plot. It is a story after all. So at its core, events happen to the characters, and characters make decisions in response to these events, causing more events. And the cycle goes on. One thing that people might underestimate in horror is agency. For example, it makes sense that to make the audience scared, you should make the characters feel as vulnerable and helpless as possible, right? Well, sure, to an extent, inevitable doom is rather depressing. But it can be so much more. The horror becomes much more powerful when the events are direct consequences of the character's own actions. There's that dramatic irony, where the audience may realize how stupid their idea is before the characters do, and that can create anxiety and fear quite effectively. For example, in The Monkey's Paw by W.W. Jacobs, there is this artifact where the characters make a wish, and it comes true in the absolute worst way possible. Like, you wish for money, and 1,000,000 coins rain down and smother you to death, or something like that. We as the audience know it is a terrible, horrible, awful, dreadful idea to ever wish anything, but guess what? The characters do it anyway. And that builds fear as we bite our nails waiting to see how this poor bloke's gonna get bamboozled by his own wish. Everything in moderation though. If you're dropping your characters to such low intellect levels that the audience begins wondering how they survive getting out of bed in the morning, it's gonna start feeling cheap and unrealistic, leading to a failure in suspension and disbelief. Hey, there's a house in the middle of the woods with skeletons all around and screams at night. We should go in and explore by ourselves without telling the cops or anything else. Yeah. And that brings us to the finale. We're winding down to the end here, so let's summarize what we've learned. First, our biological fear response is mediated by the rational part of our brain. To effectively exploit our audience's fear, we must make the threat feel real and believable, and take away their sense of control. We take advantage of the power of imagination to let the audience do the work for us and create the scariest monster for them. We increase tension and anxiety by using ambiguity. And finally, we structure our story by a gradual escalation in fear, very similar to how the plot of any story would go. I hope this was helpful and you learned something today. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe, help me out. I'm just getting started here with making videos, and I'd love to see you around in the future. If you have any thoughts you want to add to the discussion or found something you disagreed with in the video, feel free to drop a comment down below. I'd be happy to continue this conversation with you even after the video is over. For more case studies and in-depth reading, check the links in the description. And thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you guys next time.